Hi, It Girls. We're back with another episode of the It Girls Guide, and we have a very special guest. It's my mom. So she is Chief Federal Judge, the Honorable Nannette Jolivette Brown, but to me, she's mom. And today she's here as mom. But before we talk about mom stuff, because I did do an episode recently that you guys hopefully have seen, where I talked about my relationship with my parents, specifically my relation with my mom, and how I was able to transition almost from being daughter to friend. We have much more of like a best friend relationship now, and it takes work. And we talked about that. So then I thought, why not just have my mom here to talk about that? And we will have her back because she's a very interesting woman. I'm so grateful to have been raised by her. But today she's here to talk about our friendship. But we'll give them some background. So, mom, say hi to everybody.
Hi. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. I still call her Rachel, Richie, for having me on your show. I'm so proud of what you're doing here, and I think that you're providing some valuable information for women who deal with some of the same issues we all deal with.
Yeah.
And so, thank you.
She's my number one fan.
I am.
So, just to give a little background context on who you are, because I think that's it informs a lot of our relationship in general, because I have a very successful, accomplished mother. I think that definitely played a role in our relationship when I was a child, because you had high expectations for me, because you have high expectations for yourself. And also they're big shoes to fill, but you are a federal judge, right? If you
Yes,
can give a little background of you're a quick version of what your career path was, because she's not just federal judge.
Yes. Well, I am currently a federal judge, but after graduating law school, I was a lawyer, I was a partner in a law firm, a relatively large law firm, where I litigated commercial matters, and eventually evolved into environmental litigation. I was a law professor where I taught environmental law, and I represented environmental organizations like Greenpeace. And I was also a public official. I worked under two mayors in the city of New Orleans, and also worked with a number of governors from
Not
New
to
Orleans as a
interject, but she
lawyer.
was city attorney when I was in high school, which was very fun because she was in charge of shutting down all the bars that were serving underage kids, which included me and my friends. So that probably played a role in me being a little bit unpopular in high school.
Yeah, I think she thought that was the worst thing that could happen.
It was embarrassing at the time, and now I am so proud of you. I didn't appreciate it then.
So yeah, I did a variety of things as a lawyer before I became a federal judge, because at the time when I first became a lawyer, it was a time where women were just really entering the profession. And there were a lot of limits on what you can do, particularly as a trial judge. I'm sorry, as a trial lawyer. Once you had kids, you'd be moved off the partnership track and, asked to work part-time. And you used to join a firm after law school, and you would either stay with that firm. If you left, you'd have to go it on your own. But I like to think that I challenged those rules. I did move around a bit in law firms to find the fit that I needed. And I moved from practicing law to teaching law into government, and ultimately was able to pull all those experiences together to make me well prepared to be the judge that I am today. I don't think that if I had not experienced any one of those things, I would be the judge that I am today. So I guess what I'd say is, at the time, some of those choices seemed difficult, and I often thought that, I wasn't really making a choice, that it was just few options. But when I look back on things, I was really sort of being pointed into the direction I needed to go, to walk on the path to lead me to my ultimate goal was to be a federal judge.
And we're obviously here to talk about our relationship and like the mother-daughter friendship relationship. But I think it's important to at least touch on this, which is because I did do an episode with Alyssa Smith. If you haven't watched the episode, please do, because we talked about the balance of motherhood and career
Yes.
and the tough choices you make. And I believe I touched on this in the episode, but one of my kind of like little anecdotal stories that I tell pretty often is when you were on a panel at the UN and someone had asked, she had said, she's a working mom and she's having trouble balancing the two things and she's missing out on things. And no one asked my mom, how did you balance having a close relationship with your children along with having this career? And my mom decided to put me on the spot. I was there just to support in the crowd.
If I remember it correctly, you raised your hand.
She's going to tell it. I knew you were going to say that.
We're not talking about balance and on the panel, balancing work and family.
But that's what the question was.
That's the question. And
my mom knows me well enough to know if you give me a mic.
Richie, she raised her hand and I was like saying, don't ask her. Don't. I didn't know I was so afraid.
This is the typical mother-daughter relationship. We have two different versions of the story, but I'm going to let her tell hers.
But no, I was so afraid that, because as a mom and as a working, I don't know that we had ever talked about it.
Yeah.
And, I talked about the changes that I made, but they weren't solely to get to a career. I mean, the reason I was hitting these walls is because I wanted very much to be a good mother. I wanted to be a supportive wife. And I wanted to, and I needed time to do that. And I had to take positions that allowed me to do that. But also, whatever job you're in, you still have to be very focused and concentrated. Particularly if you're a lawyer, you have people outside of your family, right, relying on you to provide a service. Or if you're a partner in a law firm or you're running some organization, people rely on you for their livelihood. So those are real deep pressures. But I had never talked to you about it. I just could remember in my mind, it seared every single thing that I had missed out on. And I was afraid that that's what you were going to say. So tell me your response.
I feel like that was a beautiful moment in our relationship because, again, she was worried about what I was going to say. And when I got the mic, I said, I only know my mom to be an incredible role model. And I was like, I'm sure that, I know she missed out on some soccer games or some bake sales or whatever. I don't remember any of that. I'm sure I gave her a lot of shit when she did that too. I'm sure I said something to her like, Mom, I can't believe you missed X, Y, and Z. As an adult, I don't remember any of that. What I do remember all the times my mom showed up. I do remember she wasn't, what do we say? Like your lawyer mom cookies. Or
right. I would buy the cookies.
She would buy the cookies for the bake sale. She was not baking the cookies. I didn't care. Maybe I said something about that when I was a kid, but as an adult, when I look back, I only see
and that really
model.
Was, I mean, I think I started to cry. I was just so happy because that's what you want. I wanted her not to be focusing on things I'd missed or things I messed up on. I mean, I couldn't hand make a costume, and they had all these rules like, you couldn't hire a seamstress to do it for you. You had to kind of do it yourself. And so, I thought she would remember,
No, but I think, in transitioning to how we got to our relationship, I think that's just such a poignant story because you weren't sure how I was going to answer. And the big switch, I think, in our relationship was me seeing you as a human, as an adult, rather than just my mom who's supposed to do all these things for me, right? So I had a different opinion or a different view of who you were, how you were to me when I was a child, right? Versus how I look at you now. And there's things I definitely overlooked when I was a kid because I didn't have the capacity or understanding to
well,
to
you
do
know,
that.
and as a parent, we have to understand that. And you only hope that your child will grow one day to understand you, to forgive you, to realize that, babies don't come with a handbook. Motherhood doesn't come with a handbook. I mean, we haven't thought about that, but really talked about it. But my upbringing was a lot different from what I was able to provide for my own children. So it was really a blank slate and sort of an ideology of how I thought, a good mother could be. while I was still, pursuing my career,
Yeah.
because that was still something that was important to me. And I think I remember leaving the message with the women at the UN, which I tell to young women all the time. And maybe it's balancing out to be a little bit different now. But, I always said, for women growing up, or in my time, it's like, you can have it all. You might not have it all at the same time. And so it's how I was able to process having to move out of some positions and do different things, to accommodate my family or to accommodate me. But then being able to, get back on the track at a quicker pace, or having picked up something that I needed to learn so that I could be better at the next step. While not totally missing out on just being there, with my children, because those are, I don't look back now that I'm getting closer to retirement age. I don't look back and miss anything or have any regrets in my career. I just think back and wish I had had more time to spend with my children and to spend with you as my daughter. I hope you appreciated some of the things that I was doing. But I was sort of living through some of those things for the first time because I didn't have those same, advantages. And when I look back, it's sort of, I could live the things that I missed, through my own daughter's eyes, whether they were good or bad, and in the bed they weren't
that
bad.
phase of our relationship where like you do live some things vicariously through me. She encourages me to do some things for the plot where I'm like, is this really a good idea? And she's like, no, keep going, get in the cab, go to the party, and then call me immediately when you leave. And that's like, the amount of times I have like called you from a club bathroom or something to be like, you will never believe who just walked in. Like at this point.
And I'll say, go talk to them. And
Yes.
she's like, what? Are you kidding me? I'm like, oh yeah. And then call me back and tell me.
People are always surprised by, one, our relationship, but two, how much I tell you. And I think when I was in high school, right, or like growing up and I was doing things that maybe I wasn't supposed to be, I was so afraid of you judging me. And who knows if you actually, or we'll get to that, if you actually were. But then at some point we got to a point where I was like, oh, she's not judging me. She just wants to know.
Yeah.
She wants to be involved. And I think
at one point, we told you and your father and I told you and your brother that, because we understood at the time that you have peers, there peer pressure, we won't be able to know everything, but we always said, just give us a call, give us an opportunity. We know, and we tell you, we know we can't stop you from doing what you want to do, but give us an opportunity to weigh in and just listen. And then you're going to do what you want to do, but nobody loves you more than we do. Nobody wants the best for you more than we do. So just give us a chance to weigh in on that decision, and then we'll let you make it.
I tell this to people all the time, and I'm going to be very clear. My parents never condoned underage drinking, ever. That was never part of the.
No, please be clear about that.
But one of the things that you guys did was say, if you're ever in a situation where you're too drunk to drive, your friend's too drunk to drive, you're in a place where you shouldn't be and you're nervous, whatever it is, no matter what, if you call us, we will come pick you up. You will not get in trouble. You're not going to get grounded. We're not going to come at you. We're not going to give you a lecture. Just call us. And I think, at least in my tenure as your teenage daughter, I think I made that call twice, and both times,
because the point
parents
is,
were there, picked me up, nothing.
The point is, you learned something in that situation. We don't have to punish you or repeatedly tell you like that was a bad idea to sneak.
Embarrassing enough to have to tell my dad, I need you to come find me in this party, and all my friends are going to know my dad's walking around this party, and come and get me. That was embarrassing enough. I learned.
And then, so you wouldn't put yourself in that situation, but you didn't have to see it through a negative end. You knew that you could call us.
And I would never be afraid,
right?
So afraid to call my parents for help that I let a bad situation get worse. And not to get morbid, and I won't get into the details, but I do know people who growing up rest in peace, have passed away because their friends were not willing to make that call because they didn't want to get in trouble. And that happened, you know what story I'm talking about, but that happened years after we had had this, I guess, like agreement, as we'll call it. And I remember that happening and dad saying to me, that's why we had that rule, because I never wanted you to be in a position where you needed us, but were too afraid. And when you're young, you don't really see the world as dangerous as it can be. And I have the biggest blessing my parents have given me, even in the ebbs and flows of the closeness of our relationship, has been that I always know, no matter what, if I'm in trouble, I can call my mom or my dad.
Right. And
And
we
I'm not
wanted
going to
you to
get
know.
judgment. I'm not going to, it's just going to be, let's fix this problem. We'll deal with the rest later.
Exactly.
And I love that. I thank you for that.
Well,
I kind of want to transition into our relationship. I think there's a lot of women and girls that are watching that can honestly benefit from both of our perspectives, because I know there's women who maybe don't have as close of a relationship with their mom and they want to get closer, or they're starting to raise kids and they're having the same kind of questions you had as you were raising me. And I think I first want to start with kind of comparing the relationship you had with your mom and how you made changes to make that different with me, because I think a lot of women have broken relationships with their parents, or strained relationships with their parents, and there's two parts there, right? One, how do I mend that to be closer with my mom in my adult age? And two, how do I not repeat maybe some mistakes or things that didn't work for me with my, my children as I'm raising them?
well, um, my relationship with my mother was one of just fear. Um, fear of, not fear of being judged. I mean, I had a very real fear of, emotional, physical harm. It was just, she had a lot of issues.
Again, not to interject, but I want to give some context here, because I think people see my life and assume it's one way, are going to see your life and assume it's
Right.
one way.
Very different.
My parents, I'm so blessed, are so successful, but also we weren't raised in what we have now, right? And my parents both grew up in rural Louisiana, Alexandria and Lafayette, probably places most of you haven't heard of. My mom grew up in a very different environment, which, just to
Right.
say,
My mother
enjoy.
didn't graduate. Neither of my
Yeah,
parents graduated from high school.
yeah.
Um, and and my mother had 5 children. She and her husband my father were divorced. Um, which, even being divorced, they were devout Catholics. You would be excommunicated from the
Very
church.
hard.
You didn't have the same support. Um, and so she really, raised me with an iron hand. She had made a lot of mistakes in her life. I mean, look, she didn't graduate from high school, but she was a brilliant woman. She was very well read. And had always been her hope, her dream, to have a better education. So she just didn't want me having any kind of distractions whatsoever. And her way of going about it was very firm, and and very clear,
Why you're so
very
disciplined.
strict. um and at the time it's seemed, there was no discussing with her anything, because she was just very clear, um and really didn't care about me missing out on anything, because she felt like, you're not going to miss out on anything in high school, you're really not, and you go on to college. But also there was sort of a limit to her expectations of me. Um, she wasn't necessarily happy I was going to law school, because this is rural
Yeah.
Louisiana. She thought, like, well, then who's going to marry you? You're going to be like, I mean, most of the guys around there were farmers,
Yeah.
and just like,
Much
you're going to
different
be
life.
you'd be too smart. Like, like, why
Who's
would you
gonna
wanna
want to
do
be
that?
with a smart woman?
Yeah, it's like, that's just,
I know
you're
she
going to
looks
really
like
let
she's
her.
30, but this is, in the 70s, 80s.
Oh yeah, this would have been in the 70s
Yeah.
and the 80s, which doesn't seem like that long ago, but she was really, concerned, and
Yeah.
felt like, look, I've made all these sacrifices to get you through high school, to get you through college, and it was really sort of at some point, look,
You're supposed to get married.
well, you're gonna have to take care of me, like, because I've made all these sacrifices, I've given you everything I have. And so all of that was really, a lot of pressure. Now, I have to say, she was still alive when I graduated from law school, and she was very supportive. And she was although she understood that, you know, um, she didn't understand how my life was different, but she was supportive of it. I mean, I laughed, and I remember her because she couldn't tell her anything. She'd tell her because she was proud, but she'd tell all her sisters everything. I was like, and everybody in the whole
There's no
town
secrets.
knew every single thing. But I remember going home for a holiday, and I could hear her and my aunt like talking, and I mean, they were very concerned because I had graduated from law school, and they kept saying, she keeps practicing and practicing law. I just don't know when she's going to get to do it. So that's
Practicing
like, and I try to say, no, it's called the practice of law. And then I realize,
they're just not going to get
they're
it.
not going to get, but they were like, happy. And they would always say, well, I guess she has her career, but they never imagined,
So
like, if you went that far, that you would actually.
She prioritized you having an education, and she was a bit strict. I would say that's pretty similar to how you raised me, is that one, you prioritized education.
I did.
That was always something I knew that I had to accomplish. And you were pretty strict when I was growing up, which is funny that my friends now would be like, how was it even possible because of our relationship now? But growing up, you were strict. Do you think that was because of you were mimicking that, or that was like a safety thing of knowing, okay, if I'm controlling or I'm disciplined with her, it'll help?
Well, I knew that there were certain dangers out there, and
She
that
thinks everybody wants to kidnap me.
because look how beautiful she is, and so of course everybody wants to kidnap her. But children are so. I wanted to keep you innocent as long as I could. Children are so innocent, but the world isn't so innocent, and so there are certain situations where, as an adult, it might not be. It's probably more likely than not to be an unsafe situation for your child, and every parent doesn't parent the same way, and just one mistake, one incident can change your child's life forever. I mean, one of the rules when I look back on it, I know you thought it was unfair, but I wouldn't let you sleep over.
I was never allowed to have sleepover. I could have people sleep over at my house, but I could not sleep out.
Right. I mean, the one time I did let you sleep out, it must have been like 12 or 13. Y'all were going to a party. You were supposed to go back to somebody's house.
Yeah.
And then I called to check. And the mom said, "Oh, they let the neighbor's boy take y'all to a coffee shop." It was like
not
10:30.
I think I was like 15 at the time. I
don't know whatever.
In her mind, still too young to be doing whatever the hell I was doing.
Red flag is like, number one, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Coffee shops are closed. Where are they going?
We were lying
with this. Yeah, clearly. So if they were at my house, I would not have allowed that, no matter how much I trusted the boy next door.
Yeah.
So I got your dad. We got in a car
and
we came and, yes, we came and got her and brought her home. And I remember, the mom was like, "Oh, you're going to embarrass her."
Oh, my parents did not care about embarrassing me.
And I didn't care. I was like, I don't care if she's embarrassed, because she's got to be strong enough to say no, to anybody that suggests something that she knows is an unsafe situation. So no, I'm taking her home. And I remember the mom said, "Oh my God, if I did that, my daughter would slap me." I was like, Rachel's not going to slap me.
I would
never
in a million years.
I was like, I'm not, that is never going to happen. Just get my daughter out here. We're going home. Because the point was, I wanted you to know how clear we were on that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, perhaps as you're an adult, you can see how, that kid, what if y'all were drinking? He's only 16. You could have, a drunk driver could have hit.
This is
like
one of
all
those
these
moments
things.
You don't get to, I mean, I feel like unless you're having a sit down conversation like this, where it's very directed, you don't get to have these conversations really, but this is my time to say, like, it worked.
Yeah.
Because I've been having this conversation, been coming up a lot recently, just based on things that have been happening in my own life, but the ability to like say no, to say, "Oh, I'm not interested in that. That's not what I'm looking for." Even if you want something different, that's good for you, but that's not what I want. Being very clear on what I want. And I think something that both my parents, but you as a mother, as a woman, instilled in me is you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. You can change your mind. No matter what, you are in control of your own life, and what anybody else has to say is honestly irrelevant. And she knows I was bullied. I dealt with other things. I was always having other people in my ear, but I always knew that I had my family. And so if I was going to say no to something or decide not to do something or do something embarrassing or whatever it was, at least my family's not going to be embarrassed by me. So I'll be fine.
Exactly. No, and that's a, you know, knowing and being empowered to say no, at a young age, particularly for a woman, is good. And so, that was the lesson in that. Of course, when you're a parent, maybe in retrospect, I could have discussed some of that more with you, but again, motherhood doesn't come with a handbook. At the time, I was just thinking, this is non-negotiable, and you need to do it because I said so. Look, I'm gonna spoil your children, and they won't get, it's like, they'll be coming to grandma when they want to do something. But I'm just kidding.
What do I say? My mom would always say no to everything all the time. Like, be like, if mom says no, it's a soft no. We might be able to change your mind. If dad says no, it's we don't ask again. Right. He says yes to most things, and then if it's a no, it's a no.
But you have to. I mean, if y'all want, I try to figure out some way for you to do it. Just like you said, I wouldn't let you sleep over, but you could. You had girls sleeping over for weekend after weekend after weekend.
Girls over for 3 nights, and she'd be like, I can't parent all these kids.
It would just be, or like, I'd come home from working all day, and it was always like open table, right? Anybody who wanted to have dinner. And it's like, but you're planning a dinner for 4,
and then all of a sudden you got 10 people.
10 people, it was just.
And like 10 teenagers, we eat a lot more at that age. So,
and teenage boys too, because you and your brother are 11 months apart. And we just
we just had a full house
please save a little for dad. When he walks in the
start
door.
Getting a second fridge or something. I think so. I kind of want to bring it back to, again, like our relationship. And there's another moment in, I think most mother-daughter relationships have this clash, right? Because at some point there's this combination of, the coming of being a woman and being like, but I know what's right for myself. And you're like, okay, but I know a little bit more about life, right? And then there's this additional part of like almost I am a younger version of you, right? But I'm also very different from you. And there becomes, I think, a point when really it's like you hit your teenage years where we clashed a lot because you would have handled a situation differently than I would have.
Well, I'll tell you, one of my friends said this when you were really, really young to me, said, Rachel is you if you were born at 30. It's just like and I had you at 30.
Yeah.
And so when I looked at you as a child, I looked at you as I was as a child.
Yeah.
But you were so, you were always, you don't believe me when I tell you this, but you were always very smart and like mature beyond your years.
Tell her what to do all the time.
Yes. She was like in her little walker, the little finger, no, mommy, no. And I was like, I remember crying to my mom a few times. I was like, she just bossed me around. She tells me no, her first word.
And what did mama say?
She's 1. She's like 18 months. You're the mom. Why are you crying? I'm like, because she's fussing at me.
But for me to be you me as a baby being you at 30 is more of a reflection of you.
Exactly. I grew to understand that. And my friend pointing that out to me is that you had her at 30, you've become a different person. Yeah. You're different now than you were when you were a teenager, even when you were in college. And so, it is that you who is raising this young girl.
I think so it'd be different. You underestimate how good you were at parenting me and giving me lessons. And maybe I also was not the best at, especially back in the day, showing you that. Because of course your mom tells you something you're supposed to know and you're learning the lesson. You're of course you're going to huff and puff. And I'm not going at 16, going back to my mom and saying, you were right.
Yeah.
But this is me saying, you were right.
Those are, well, thank you. But as a parent, that, particularly teenagers, they are growing, they're maturing. teenagers think they know everything.
Yeah.
But we all know that because we've
Yeah.
all been teenagers. Although when I was a teenager, my mother would not allow me
You were too
to
terrified.
to do anything outside the lines
Yeah.
of what. And I know I look back on that. I have so much understanding and forgiveness for her because she was trying to protect me.
Yeah. She was doing her best.
She was doing the best she had with very little resources. And she just really, really wanted the best for me.
And that, I want to take that soundbite basically, because that understanding that about your mom is the same thing I decided to, or not decided to, or I actually no, it was a decision to actively understand this about my relationship with you is, when we butt heads, and I want people to understand this, and this is not to negate the beautiful, like, close relationship I have with my mom, but we were not always this close, right? That takes effort. And I want to be honest about that because I know there are plenty of people out there that have strained relationships with their moms. And I want to say, like, there were points where we barely spoke. I mean, you would always text me and know where I was, right? But where I was not trying to, I didn't want my mom to know anything about my life.
And your dad and I, with you and your brother, you were talking to him.
Yeah.
We never let you
Someone
like
was,
completely
I was like, I'm not
disconnect.
talking to mom, and I'm like, don't tell that bitch anything I have to say. And I'm like, I know my dad's relaying. I know
you were alive.
I know my dad's talking to me on speakerphone with me next to him. I'm like, whatever. But point being that we had we didn't have the same kind of friendship that we have
and what I
now.
want to say to that, to parents, and why we do that is, like, sometimes it becomes, like the parents against the child. And I just want to say that, you're both parents and you never want to cut that line of connection between. They'll be upset with one parent or the other. And that's when the other one, whether you agree or disagree, has to keep the line of communication going. And that's what we always did, like with you and your brother.
You said that just now, I've actually never conceptualized that or really thought about it, but it is so true, because there's been times I've been mad at my dad. There's been times I've been mad at my mom and didn't want, but I've always been talking to, I've never been not talking to either of you. And I've also recognized retrospectively, there are times when I said, like, oh, I'm mad at mom, I'm not talking to her. And I've noticed, not realizing that it was a conscious effort, dad reaching out to me more, making sure he's staying in contact so that there's not that misstep.
It was intentional.
Now I know it was intentional. Well, I think it's important, again, to kind of guide us back to how we can help someone else who might be in a similar situation that we were in before, right? Maybe not being.
Well, I think it's, how do you transition, right? How do you transition? I think a lot of parents my age are kind of experiencing that now. Like, how do you transition from being the parent to being more of a friend? And, I don't know if it's more, I just see more and more parents in that, their children get to a certain age and then they look back on their childhood and they see all these problems, and they want some answers. And what I would say is, as a parent, what I realized I needed to do was validate what how you experienced your own childhood. Even though I'd say, well, I didn't intend to do this, but stop saying that, or that's not what was happening. Don't say it, because, I thought, like, compared to my, if I
beautiful childhood, we still had a beautiful
if you
childhood.
compare, I mean, I hate to give like a terrible example, but my mother had a lot of problems. I mean, she couldn't deal with anything, it's like she really, and working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to take care of 5 children. It was just too much. Walking outside the line or whatever. Yeah. I mean, if I saw with my older siblings, if she came home and everybody wasn't there, like when they were supposed to be, like, your stuff would be packed and put on the front porch. She would be like, I can't deal with you.
Yeah.
My
mom would never do that. I'm still on her, on her cell phone plan.
They didn't have the luxury of following your location, and it was just. And now I realize it was too stressful. She'd rather just feel like, I never know where you go. I won't expect anything. You need to go. It was very extreme, but she had a lot of issues she was dealing with. So I felt like we were providing our children with, so many options. We were we were there.
Yeah.
You were well cared for, and we were present.
Yeah.
I'd kiss you at night, even though it'd freak you out.
Oh,
like
not sidebar. Not that my mom would kiss me at night. My mom would stand in the doorway of a dark room and just watch me sleep. Which, like, when you get that sense that someone's watching you, if you just see a dark figure in a doorway when you open your eyes in the middle of the night, it's fucking terrifying. But then you realize it's just your mom
kissing you, and then she comes to kiss you.
That made it really hard for me to sneak out later in life, because then I would like put like pillows and like my fucking hair extensions like coming out of the pillow and be like, she's never gonna notice. And then she goes to kiss my forehead and it's a goddamn basketball.
Be like, oldest trick in the book. The first time I realized that one of my kids had snuck out, whatever,
Yeah.
I was just like, it was just beyond me, because I
She couldn't believe it. She lifted up the covers. There's pillows and basketballs. She's like, how could they?
I know.
Meanwhile, we had like shimmied because we had broken the
chimes.
Yeah, we broke the chimes on the doors, but then we knew you could still, the dogs would bark. So we would shimmy down out of this window
No idea.
off of the gutter to get out of the house.
I had no idea. Had no idea.
Yeah. And of course you told Dad, and Dad's like, of course they're sneaking out. What did you think they were doing?
I know. Okay.
She's
So
like,
yeah,
"No, I thought they were in their rooms."
my husband had lived a much more exciting life.
He got in trouble a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He was, and still is, more of a risk taker.
Yeah.
But it was not, he wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
I don't know that he snuck out of his house, but I'm just saying he wasn't surprised by the fact that
shocked.
the kids were. I was just floored. Like, I could not even imagine, because I tucked them in. I kissed them goodnight.
Just clip that. She tucked us in, kissed us goodnight. We were 17 years old. But you let her do it because okay, we let her tuck us in. Then we wait 20 minutes. She's going to be asleep and we'll be out.
Yeah. We did have a dog that would rat you guys
Yeah, our dog would bark.
Hercules would come and get me. Like, he'd let him sneak out. But if at 2 a.m.
He always let you know when we were sneaking back in.
Well,
and then I try to pretend like I'm just in this little mini dress that you didn't buy me that I snuck in, and I'm making myself eggs at 2 a.m. for no reason.
If they weren't because at 2 a.m. for whatever reason, our lawn sprinklers would come on. That's an odd time. Usually it's like maybe 4 or 5, but maybe your dad timed it there for a reason. But those sprinklers would go on. He'd go look in the rooms, and then he'd come by my bed and start barking if they weren't in there, and I'd go looking for them. He'd rat y'all out every time.
He did rat us out quite too much. But R.I.P. I do have a tattoo for him. That's another story. My brother and I got tattoos for our dog, and then showed up at dinner. We were all crinkly because we had like the saran wrap on us. And they were like,
and her brother got
do? And we were like, no, nothing. We didn't do anything.
Of the dog.
Yeah. So I want to get back to when we're talking about mother-daughter relationships, right? There was a point where we kind of transitioned from what I feel like is more, I mean, of course, you're still my mom. You still parent me in some ways and you give me advice, right? But there was a turning point between, it was kind of two-part thing. One, where we became more friends than mother-daughter, and two, where there was a shift in, I think, both of us actively trying to change our relationship. And I do believe we had like maybe one conversation about it, but I think it really came from us both wanting to have a closer relationship. And I always think about the turning point being, look, everybody here knows I'm divorced, but when I got married, and I think one, it was like, okay, she's an adult now, she's getting married, but specifically my bridal shower. And my mom planned this beautiful bridal shower, and there was, I'll be honest.
What, initially?
Okay, it's not that I didn't want the bridal shower. It's that like it was COVID. It was already hard to get everybody on the same dates, and she like had gone behind my back, aka with my maid of honor Gabby, and found the one weekend during the summer where all of my close girlfriends were available. And then she decided to throw me a bridal shower. And I'm like, if there's one weekend where that's my bachelorette party. And she wanted to do it in New York. And I was like, I don't want to have a bachelorette party in New York. I was supposed to go to St. Bart's. It was going to be this whole thing. But
COVID,
she chose that one weekend. And I was like, okay, fine. And then she's like inviting her friends. I'm like, I don't know. Like, this is supposed to be about me. And then I started, it was honestly.
And she was like, I am not letting anybody make a wedding dress out of toilet paper.
Oh, I wanted
am
none of
not
that.
playing games. And I was just laughing.
And then my mom's like, we're at the peninsula. We're not doing wedding dress toilet paper shit. Like, we're not doing that. And I was like, okay, whatever. And it was the most beautiful, fun weekend having all my, and then cause like, I kind of started to realize like, oh, a lot of my friends, like my extended friends outside of like my close friends in New York, don't get to come to New York that often, don't get to do things like this. And we're all staying in the hotel together. And then it's my mom and a few of her friends. And I think when you're growing up, right, like you saw me, I always say there's multiple versions of someone, right? And there's a different version of you for every person that you meet. And when it comes to your parents, the majority of the time you spent with me, you knew me was when I was in my house, right? Our house growing up as a child, right? And then you hear stories here and there, but otherwise you're spending a couple days with me during holidays and whatnot. And at the time, I felt like my mom doesn't understand me. She doesn't know me because the girl that she knows is 15 years old and I'm not that person anymore. And I felt like there was this shift, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like it happened at the same time where I felt like my mom met all my friends. And I remember you coming up to me and being like, all your friends are so beautiful and accomplished.
And you met my friends.
And exactly.
And wait, it was the bizarre thing. We always had like a friend per friend. Like even like their appearances were like,
there was a lot of
bizarre.
And it was this moment of being like, oh, my mom is seeing me as a woman because she's seeing and she's proud of the women I'm surrounding myself with. And then simultaneously, I'm seeing my mom as a friend.
Now, I would say from that point on, I got to know your friends better and you got to know my friends better. Yes. And I feel like we're kind of like it really did. And I did not give you a bridal shower where people were making wedding dresses with toilet papers.
No, my bridal shower was spectacular. After that, I was like, okay, I don't need a bachelorette party.
And I remember because y'all took me out, me and my friends out to
we got my mom at the club.
I know. And your brother texted me, he's like, did I see a video with you dancing on the table with my ex-girlfriend?
Sure did. Sure did. And she looked fantastic doing it. One of her friends, she was still at the club. And like, my mom's like, wait, are you with her? I won't say her name. But like, were you with her? And I was like, wait, no, she's still at the club with us. What do you need? No. It was beautiful. And just being able to see you in that light. And then I feel like you being able to see me in that way, it blurred those lines between mom and friend.
And what I remember is after the shower, we went out like the night before. Then you had the wedding shower, and then me and my friends and the minors had dinner. But you and your friend had another night out.
We had a big night out. Shout out to Acme.
Yeah, and I remember you just really coming up to me and telling me that you didn't think you wanted it. But it was perfect. Yeah. It was exactly what you needed.
Any better.
I know. And I mean, like, I was just like, and my friends were like, oh, you did good. Because that's all, it was to me, it was just a touch of tradition. It was something I never had and always wished I had had.
And that's the part that I want to emphasize because there was a lot of things that I feel like even growing up to, and then that being one of the things that I originally took for granted, thinking it's about me. I was being selfish. I was thinking it was about me and I wasn't considering that like, oh, this is about her too. And when we cut to like my actual wedding, and I mean, I still, this harbor guilt that we had this big wedding and then I get divorced a year later. But I also look at it as this thing that like we got to plan together, and I don't look at my wedding as my wedding. It was like my mom had 3 outfit changes. Okay.
But you got to, and that was very important. Particularly to your father, because you're his only daughter. It's like he wanted you to have the wedding of your dreams no matter what. Yeah. And so, I had strict instructions, just zip it up. And so let you make your choices and ask me when you wanted my advice on things. So I tried to abide by that.
And I get some credit. I did love your advice.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
The florals are all my mom.
I do remember, like, what were we?
We're going to have to splice in some photos of my wedding. We'll blur my ex's face out. My wedding was fucking incredible.
It was. People are
wrong man.
Talk about it.
Completely right wedding.
But I remember we were disagreeing about like one of the venues or something for a dinner wedding. Yeah. And we would go back and forth about something. And I was really getting like trying to keep my mouth shut, really getting mad. And we were in the lobby of of a particular hotel we
Oh, we
stay
know.
at. And you just started laughing. And I was like, what are you laugh? What is so funny? And he was like, we are exactly alike. It's just like, and then I had to start laughing. It was like,
Yeah.
because at that moment we were exactly alike.
Like,
And
oh,
it
I
was
am
like,
my
why we
mother's
just,
daughter. Yeah. I think finding those moments too, and those like little bits where you can see yourself and your mother is, and like owning that, even if it's something that you don't like about yourself or you're insecure, but or you haven't figured out yet, owning that as like a means of connecting to your mom. Cause now it's like growing up, I would always say, I'm nothing like her. I'm nothing like her. Cause
I
I was a
know.
bitchy teenager. And now I'm like, oh, like we are the same. I tell my mom everything. I mean, I was just before we started rolling, I was telling my producer was like, "Oh, we were just at the game last night and we're with friends and one of my friends whispers something to me and I'm not going to tell the story because it
No,
would out this man, but you
no.
know what I'm talking about." And I called this guy that she's seeing by his nickname. As we all know, as women, we
Don't say
don't
what it
call
is.
them, we cannot say that.
Right?
We don't call men by their actual names until they're like boyfriend status, really. You call them by whatever nickname, which is usually a descriptor. I called him by this nickname. My mom immediately starts cracking up laughing. And my friend turns and is like, "What?" I was like, "Oh, she knows. There's nothing, if you're telling me something, my mom knows too. Like, that's just, it's part of the gig, whatever. She's not going to tell anyone. She's a federal
Yeah.
judge. No one wants to tell her any gossip. Anyway,
No,
that's the
they
saddest
don't.
part about your job is that no one wants to tell you any
Nobody wants to tell
gossip.
me. No, nobody wants to tell me
So I have
gossip.
to
They don't
make up
gossip
for
with
it. I
me.
got to tell you all the
And
gossip so
I'm
you
like
know.
waiting for the tea. If she
Waiting for
sends
the
me
tea.
a text that says I've got tea, I don't care what I'm doing. I'm shutting that down. I'm like, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
have a family emergency. I need to-
Literally, when they say like, if there's a crazy situation, you don't yell rape, you yell fire. In my situation, I don't say, "Mom, I really need you." I say, "Tea. I have tea for
I'm
you."
like, gotta
She
go.
will she will be in court and be like, "I'm so sorry, we're gonna have to take a little intermission." What do you call it? It's not an intermission. What do you call it in the court?
A recess.
A recess. I gotta take a quick recess.
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen that often. Of
I'm
any litigants
exaggerating.
are out there, but
But
in
have to
court.
take a recess for a little. Sometimes I gotta get a little tea.
Right.
Sometimes I
Okay,
need my
that
mom's
is an
opinion.
exaggeration for people. I do not recess
Yes,
for
she
tea.
doesn't actually recess for
For
tea.
tea.
But if I need her
But the minute we
attention,
have a real break, I'm like,
yes.
what's going on?
Because
girl?
my mom will, if I don't answer my phone on the first ring, it's back-to-back calls. Then she starts calling people I know. If there is not a response within 30 minutes, helicopters are starting to circle. She set out the search party. It's happening. If I call my mom and she's in the middle of something, I'm busy. I don't answer. I'm busy. But
I
if
do
say
now
I'm tea-
understand that. I know it's the
Yeah.
extreme, but I was reading something recently that said overprotective moms
Yeah.
are
Helicopter mom, that's what we call it.
are parents who grew up not being protected at all.
Mhm.
And so I understand that. So now I
Yeah.
try, because y'all aren't children anymore. I do try to give you a little leeway, but
Yes.
it's like another part of it is like, I do remember my mom being very difficult about your dad,
Mhm.
and on her dying bed, she was like admitted, I've been terrible to him. And
Mhm.
she's like, but no matter what I've done, like, he won't leave you. And he's like, I've tried.
She's like,
He
as
won't
much as
leave
I've
you."
tried to push this man away.
I know. And I was like, what? She's like, and the reason for it is, as a mom, as a parent, you never think anyone could love your children as much as you do. But she's like, the final thing I want you to know is he does.
Mhm.
He loves you at least as much as I do,
Yeah.
but maybe more, and your children. So,
And I see
understand
when I
that.
see that in dad with you, but I also
Yeah.
see that in how you parent me. And I think, again, to go back to like the divorce thing, I think that was another like pinnacle part of our relationship. Was for so long I wanted to measure up. I wanted to impress you. I wanted to like, not that you ever asked me to earn your love or respect, but that's inherently what as a
But
child you
what
want
I
to
have learned,
do.
though, right, is that, and that is, difficult for parents to do. And
Mhm.
I've tried very hard to do it. But I understand that. I understand this very much now, is that the way I went about things, or your father went about things, it is not all for the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have all the answers. I know
Yeah.
I don't. And so I have to be ready to really let you go and be
Mm-hmm.
your own woman and trust in the basics that we have
Yeah.
instilled in you
And don't
and
I
your
say that
brother.
to you? I always
Yes,
say, like,
you always say that.
when she gets really worked up, I'm like, you have to trust that you raised me to be the woman that you wanted me to be, and I got this. Like,
And
you
you
gave me the
do.
tools.
You know, um, when I look, when I look at, you know, what you are still doing with your life, it is so, it's sort of like it is then, I look at my mom and I
Mhm.
know she could have never imagined,
The
my
life you
life
have
the way it
now.
is, you know, like a little story that will bring it home is I do remember she would catch a train to come to New Orleans, and she was a sitter for elderly people, and she wanted to get on the streetcar,
Yeah.
and I was at Tulane to come to my apartment. That's how she
Mhm.
wanted to, because she loved riding the streetcar. And we'd ride in the streetcar and she would look at all these beautiful homes. And from her perspective, right, someone who didn't graduate even from high
Yeah.
school, she'd say, these are, because she would sit for some of these people,
Yeah.
in the house. That's how she would pay for her vacation. She'd trade
Yeah.
up with another woman and she'd sit in New Orleans and be able to see me while she was here. And she'd say, these rich people they're so kind. They're so nice. I hope one day you get to work for people who are this nice and this kind. She could not imagine
That you would be that person.
that I would own a home.
Yeah.
I would be one of those people. That would be, it
Mhm.
was just too far a leap,
Yeah.
for a woman who grew up in her circumstances to
Mhm.
even think that was, it was just beyond her. And
Yeah.
so when I look at all the things that you do, as much
Yeah.
education and training and the kinds of
Yeah.
jobs I've had and my experiences,
It's a
I
different kind of
still
experience.
could not dream of the amazing things that you're capable of doing. I mean, even this podcast, the tremendous amount of risk-taking ability it takes, the confidence,
Don't make me
and
cry.
you're always prepared.
Mhm.
You have developed this a beautiful circle of friends,
Yeah.
and how you support one another. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys, all of you, I've seen them come through for you. I've seen
Yeah.
you come through for
That's like
them.
my biggest, like, the best thing that I feel like I get to show you is my relationships with the women
I
in my
love them.
life,
And what I
and
love
then
about
you get
them,
to be friends
I
with them.
know, is I love that they love me too.
My mom follows like 4 of my friends' locations. They like text without me, and I love it.
Because I love them. They're
Yeah.
all like, you just so amazing. They're such a
Yeah.
reflection of you too,
Yeah.
that I couldn't imagine, my friends,
Yeah.
my limited group of friends,
For like 4 friends that I've known forever, and I love them. I
for
love
her whole
them.
life, but
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine, I have acquaintances like that,
Yeah.
but, and I'm so happy I get to share that with you and that
Yeah.
they like me enough to
Yeah,
want to
that's
hang
the
out.
beautiful, fun part about our relationship now is that we get to do things together, and I get to show you this part of myself that I'm really proud of. You played a role in making me this woman, and now it's like the time where I want to be like, okay, now you don't have to parent anymore. Let me show you what you've done. Let me show
Right.
you the kind of woman I am now. And now we get to do
And you remember
the fun
I
stuff.
was like, I showed this to I was like, so, just so moved by a little reel that you sent me,
Oh,
if you remember, because
which
look,
one?
when she was a teenager, I mean,
Oh,
many moms have said
yeah.
this before. I'm not one of your little friends.
Yes.
It's like, I'm not trying to negotiate with
Yeah.
you. I'm not trying to be popular with you. But
And now look at you.
she sent me a
You're
reel.
one of my little friends.
I know. I was like so happy that she sent me that reel. You
You
know,
are my best friend. You know that.
oh, I
I
love
don't say it enough,
that.
but you are. Because I can call you what is a best friend? Someone you can call no matter what, who is not going to judge you, who's going to listen to you, give you advice if you need it, but also be an ear. And I think the biggest shift in our relationship from you being my mom to being my friend is that one, I think there's a level of respect I
Right.
mean, of course, I've had respect for you as my mom, but now as an adult, I have respect for you as a woman, as a
And
person.
that is really important. I don't know that with all I had accomplished by the time my mother had passed away,
Mhm.
that she and a lot of my family
Yeah.
don't view me as an adult. You
Mhm.
know, accomplishment is almost like, I don't know, when you get, elected as student council
Yeah.
president and, or graduate, at
Yeah.
the top of your class. Um, and so it is important to me that I can see and relate to you
Mhm.
as a grown woman.
Yeah.
It's so important because look how you got me dressing. You
I
got
know,
me
she
all
looks great, right?
styled. So you can be my friend
And there's a
as well. We
level
don't
for
always have to
yeah.
be, and I know now it's not my job to impose my views on you. You can talk
Mhm.
to me, I can give you advice, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it is your life. And
Yeah.
I don't want you to have any regrets. I don't want you to look back and say,
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that, but mom made me feel like,
Yeah.
even if you wouldn't say that
Because
to me
we've talked
directly.
about this. There's a big part of even my relationship with my ex-husband where I stayed longer than I should have because I was trying to impress my parents. And that is not something they ever asked me to do. And I think opening up the line of communication, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like I respect you guys as humans. And I feel like as an adult, there's also been a transition where I feel like you respect me as an adult woman to make decisions for myself and you're going to give me your opinion. But also when I say, okay, I'm going to do this anyway, you're like, okay, I'm going to support you.
Right.
Call me when you need something. And that's the transition part. And I think if I'm going to give any advice, and I'll have you chime in too, to anyone, I'll chime in from like the daughter's perspective, as a child's perspective. If you are looking to have a closer relationship with your parents first, try your hardest to see them as a human, not as your parent, but as a human being who is going through their own life, going through their own obstacles, and then to find a level of respect for them. And as you said in the beginning, forgiveness. Like,
Yes.
I forgive, and we've had this conversation before. I forgive you for everything as that happened as a child. And even when I'm saying I forgive you, it's not that I'm saying I forgive you for doing anything wrong. I'm forgiving you for everything I thought you did wrong when I was a kid because I didn't know any better. Right? Like if
And
you
we have to
missed a
accept
soccer
that,
game
right?
because you had to take a
To
job
work,
because
right?
you had to work to put a roof over my head. I'm not thinking about that as a 8-year-old.
Well, and two, why you say that, there are a number, it was always, I think you appreciate it more now. There was a
Mhm.
time when you and your brother were little that I could have stayed home.
Mhm.
Um, but I know me as a person, and I think you appreciate this more as an
Yes.
adult, is that was not the choice for me.
Mhm.
I had my own self-esteem issues
Mhm.
that, I was dealing with at the
Yeah.
time.
Well, you're an
And
incredibly intelligent and now accomplished woman. Like, you knew that
and I
about yourself.
didn't want to I had put so much time and effort into that before I became a mom
Mhm.
that I was trying to figure out a way how I could still be me
Mhm.
and be a mother. Well, at the end of the day, I could be a mother, I could be a wife, and I could have this career I had longed
Mhm.
for because it gave me a sense of purpose, um, and personal accomplishment that was
Yeah.
important to me. Not that I couldn't have gotten that from being
Mhm.
a mom, but I wanted that too.
Mhm.
And although there were some compromises along the way, particularly your children are going to grow up and they're going to
Yeah.
move on. And I think it's easier for me to let go
Yeah.
and let you be an adult because I have my own thing going on,
Mhm.
right? And it is, I didn't become a judge until
Yeah.
you and your brother were graduating from high school. It seemed like I was making all these sacrifices, but then it all came together at the
Mhm.
perfect timing,
Yeah.
for me to do and have what I ultimately, but I didn't plan it that way, not
Mhm.
consciously, but somehow it all came together. So, my children are adults now. I want to look at you, view you, and let
Mhm.
you be your own independent, selves. But I don't have to hang on to you, right?
Yeah.
I still feel like I bring value. I don't have to mother you to
Yeah.
find some value.
Mhm.
I hope that you can see, the things that I do. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm a government worker, I'm never
Yeah.
going to be a millionaire in my own right. That's not, you know what I mean? That is,
Yeah.
your father had a different,
Yeah.
but those things are meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And what I contribute to my marriage is important. And what I
Mhm.
hope I have contributed to my children
It
is important, which is beyond just
Mhm.
being your mother. I was a particular kind of mother, and it just
Mhm.
means so much to me
Well,
that
I've
now
always
as
seen
an
you as a
adult, you can
mom
be,
and an accomplished woman. And that's no shade to stay-at-home moms, people who choose to
right
just be
now.
a mom. That
And
is a path as well.
I know y'all didn't realize it because when judges are sworn in, we have a big
Oh.
investiture. And so
We did not give up.
their dad had to, not my congressional hearing,
Oh, yeah.
but when I was sworn in, and your dad gave the speech for the family,
Yeah.
and then I had to give a speech to everyone there and my fellow judges. And at the end, you and your brother said, "Wow, you and dad are real good public speakers." And I'm thinking, we've been lawyers your whole life,
Yeah.
and I said, I don't spend all day at the top of the stairs screaming,
Yeah.
"Do your homework, clean your room." I
Yeah.
do say other, I am,
But
but it was
that part about
silly.
like seeing, you recognizing that your kids see you as a parent and not your whole self. It's not your job as a child to see your parent
And
as a full
actually,
human.
I wanted that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually very comforting to me
Yeah.
to know that despite all these other things your dad and I had been doing in
Mhm.
our careers and in the community, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we were just mom and dad to you.
Yeah.
And we wanted that to be
And
the
still,
case.
I mean, now we're more friends, but I mean, I remember going to your chambers for the first time and I'm walking in, I sit at her desk, I'm like kind of goofing off, I put my feet on the table, I'm eating her snacks, and her clerks come in and are like, "Don't touch anything. What are you doing?" I'm like, my mom, like, what do you care? And that was like one of those moments when I realized, oh, everyone else sees my mom one way, and to me, she's just mom. But to these people, she's an entirely different person. And, I feel blessed to be able to see this side of you. And I'm grateful to be able to show this side of you on my podcast. But then this is a side of you that my friends get to see. And this is a side of you that is my friend that
Thank
I love so
you.
much.
I love you so much, sweetheart. I appreciate you saying that.
Bestie.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Guys, we're going to have my mom back. I feel like this is a good time to wrap it up. But we're definitely going to have my mom back because she has so many stories, so many good stories. Woman has lived so much life. I feel so blessed to get all these anecdotal information, whatever, from you because I learn a lot from you. You're also so accomplished career-wise. I think we need to have an episode where you come back just to talk about career and those kinds of accomplishments and the motherhood element of it is already something that people want to talk about, but just to come from where you started and end up where you are now and to be as humble as you are, but also to still have a well-rounded life in general where it's not just all about your career is a huge thing. But I'm just so grateful to have you as my mom and get to learn so much from you and then get to
Thank
be
you.
friends now.
Yes, thank you.
I love you. And with that, thank you, girls and gays. I think that's all who listens here. Maybe there's some straights out there. Thank you for being here and listening. And this is so special because it's my mom. But we will see you next week. Thanks, guys.